article, How Jeffrey Epstein Got So Rich. Hey, Giacomo, how are you today?
Good, John. How are you?
Good. So let's start high level. Who was Jeffrey Epstein and how did he make his fortune? And what was the size of his fortune when he died in 2019?
All right. So, as is pretty well known, Jeffrey Epstein was a convicted sex offender and a wealthy financier. And what we know about how much he was worth when he died, we know from his estate, which put out a filing after his death in August 2019. And his net worth in that statement was around $578 million. Much of that was sort of in cash, investments in private equity, hedge funds, and stocks and various things like that. And in terms of how he got rich, there's obviously a lot that we don't know, but the crux of our article that we wrote together, right, was sort of digging into what we do know, what's out there from court filings and various, financial records. And so we know, thanks to, in large part, to these financial records that were obtained by a public records request from the New York Times a few years ago that looked into Epstein's firms in the U.S. Virgin Islands, that he generated more than $800 million in revenue between 1999 and 2018, which was sort of the most prolific part of his, of his activities, basically, in the with his financial sort of advice. Largely, we know that he gave, tax and estate planning advice to wealthy clients. And what's interesting from these financial records is that there's two companies he had there in the U.S. Virgin Islands where he was based. And out of sort of all of that income you brought in, 490 million, at least, could be more, because there's some years we don't have access to, came from client fees, right? So fees he was bringing in for advising his clients on, like I mentioned, trust and estate planning, tax, and sort of various things of that nature. And we also know from an expert report in a court case filed by the U.S. Virgin Islands against J.P. Morgan Chase, which was one of the banks that did business with Epstein, that these two entities that, we looked at the financial records for, they were the only revenue generating entities that Epstein had in that period.